morning, YouTube. This is the Fat Health Teacher, and today I am discussing the book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck. This was a really good book. It's a pretty easy read. Honestly, the only reason it took me so much time to finish it is because I like marking it up. Um, okay, so there are two stages or two types of mindsets that Miss Dweck, Miss Doctor, I don't know. I'll just call her Carol. Anyway, there are two mindsets that she refers to, and the first mindset is the first mindset is the fixed mindset. Much like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, things really don't change, right? You know what the world is like, and it's going to stay that way. It doesn't matter what you do, stuff will happen to you. Everybody but you is kind of responsible for what's happening. It could be I had abusive parents, and so this is why I'm like this. It could be I got this from my parents. I've inherited it. It runs on the family. My father was an alcoholic, so I'm also an alcoholic. It could be nothing is ever going to change. So if you encounter somebody who has a fixed mindset, you might hear things like, it doesn't matter what I do. What I do doesn't matter. What I do is irrelevant because I'm going to get the same results. You kind of own your labels, right? So if somebody says you have ADD, you will own that to the point where you may actually find that you are incapable of focusing on something long enough in order to get it done because you have owned that you have ADD. If somebody calls you stupid or they call you fat or that kind of thing, you completely own it, right? You're like, yeah, I am fat. Now, what I do, I don't consider it a fixed mindset. I think it's more of a acknowledgement, right? So I've had multiple kids ask me, well, Miss, are you pregnant? And it's like, no, I'm just fat. And I own that I'm fat, and I own that I need to change that. If you have a fixed mindset and you are participating in a sporting event or even practice, actually, let's start with practice. So let's say that you're on a team, you have a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is it doesn't matter how much I work out, it will be what it will be. We'll either win the game or we won't win the game. You may look at an opponent and you're like, our school hasn't beat this team in 20 years. But there's no way we're going to beat them this year. Okay. If you have an option between an easy opponent and someone with a guaranteed win and a more difficult opponent, okay, so somebody who will actually challenge you and where you could possibly lose, then you opt for the easy opponent because a win feels good and it doesn't matter to you that it was a super easy game. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. If you went for the easy opponent, and I've seen coaches do this, and it actually bothers me quite a lot, what the coach will do is let's say it's basketball, because I think a lot of you will understand basketball. All right, so you've got your 5 best players out on the court, and you decide to leave them in. Your team is up by 50 points, and instead of playing your bench players, people who need the practice, in an environment where it's okay for them to make some mistakes, you're leaving your best player in and you're running up a score. Okay? This is not how I would coach, but I'm also not a win at all odds type person. I think that how you do something is very important and can be actually more important than the end result. Okay? So with fixed mindsets, as I said, things don't change. You have addiction, you have mental health issues, weight, how smart you are. You might find yourself not trying to do something because if you try and you fail, then that will really impact how you feel about yourself. And I think I explained this prior, but you can see this with your students. So if you're a teacher, you might see this with your children. You ask them to do something, it's too hard. I don't get it. And then you ask them, well, what don't you get? And they just say everything. Okay? That's a fixed mindset. That is somebody who has really no interest in learning. They just want to either be able to get it done or to not have to do it. Okay? Let me take a look at my notes here. Okay. So in the classroom, the fixed mindset kids are, if they are labeled bad kids, and I've had these conversations with some of my students, it bothers me a lot. They'll say, um, let's see, what's a good generic? They'll say, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith thinks that I'm a terrible kid, so why would I bother trying to change his mind? And so then they'll act out in his class. They won't turn in their work, that kind of stuff. And they'll do that with Mrs. Smith too. It doesn't matter. If somebody tries to label them, they will own the label to the point where they prove the label true. Okay. If you're a teacher and you have a fixed mindset, you're probably going to do the same lesson plans year after year. I remember when I was growing up, I heard about this teacher. We'll call him Mr. Johnson, and for 20 years, he'd been teaching from the same lesson plans. Like, he didn't change things in order to accommodate new information. He didn't change things in order to address changes in the populations as the different generations came through the school. He just 20 years, same lessons. All right. People who have the fixed mindset will either reject or sabotage change. So I've seen this in staff meetings, right? So somebody comes in and we get new mandates like every few years, and it can be really frustrating. So when I first started, the big thing was the Baldrige method, but it was called continuous classroom improvement, which was all about engaging the students and getting them to own the process in the classroom. Okay, and you had PDSA, which was like the short cycle assessment thing. You had plan, do, study, act. So you had all of this stuff, and you go to a ton of trainings, and this is what you were supposed to do. And people fought that. And they said, well, what's the point of me, utilizing any of what I'm learning here when as soon as we have a change in leadership, it's going to go away. And sure enough, the leader who was really pushing Baldrige, who was really pushing that continuous classroom improvement, actually left, and the next person didn't give two anythings about it. What we ended up focusing on was pushing graduation rate, was getting higher scores. So we were looking at trying to get all of our kids up to proficient. That became the priority. And again, teachers were like, no. Okay. We had a science adoption probably, I want to say it was 4 years ago now, and the district made us believe that we could actually have some input on what curriculum was adopted. So they gave us a bunch of options. I would say like 5 that were book-based and 3 or 4 that were web or electronic or computer-based. Okay. And taking a look at our resources, our school made the recommendation for one of the book-based items. And our science department person said this is why, gave a really good explanation. She was very thorough. She really did her research in figuring out what the strengths and the weaknesses were and matching them up to what our students could benefit from. So all the recommendations went in, and then leadership chose an electronic method. And as far as transparency goes, they showed us the results. They showed us what the different schools had voted for and what they had wanted. And the program that they selected wasn't even in the top 3 of things that teachers had, voted for, or that teachers had said, this is what we're choosing, or this is what we would like. And so then that's kind of going to reinforce a fixed mindset, right? Because you want change, and you think you have the power to change, and then you discover that it was false. You discover that it was kind of like a thing to get you to buy in, but it wasn't genuine because the person wasn't actually listening to you. Okay? Let's see. Oh, another big sign of somebody with a fixed mentality is that if change happens, oh man, if change happens, it really, really impacts them, and not in any kind of a good way. All right. So I had a teacher, let's say, Mr. Costanza. Okay. So I had Mr. Costanza, and he had signed up to use a lab, but apparently there was some sort of mix-up, and I had a computer class last year. So Mr. Costanza comes in and he's in the computer lab. And I don't want to ask him why he's in there unless I have verified that I'm actually on the schedule. So I check the schedule, I pull it up, and I say, hey, Mr. Costanza, I'm not sure why you are in the room because I've signed up for it today. Okay, so Mr. Costanza was furious and went to our librarian. I don't know if he went to other people. I do know that there was quite a bit of gossip. The person was very, very frustrated. And I had been willing to share the room because Mr. Costanza's class is like 4 people. Okay, but this was not an option for this teacher, and that's a sign of a fixed mindset, right? Sometimes things happen. We can't change what happened. All we can do is try to move forward. Um, Now it's time for us to shift gears. Growth mindset. The growth mindset is nearly the polar opposite of the fixed mindset. So let me go ahead and do this. So people with the growth mindset are all about growing and learning. They learn from even their failures, right? So if you make a mistake, much like in the Robinsons, this is something to be celebrated because it means that you learn something, and the next time you try, you are more likely to succeed. This is fantastic, and you just keep trying. Um, you're kind of constantly chipping away at whatever it is that you are trying to accomplish. So when it came to breaking down that giant slab in the backyard, I could have said, ugh, this is too much work. I can't possibly do this without help. But instead, what I've been doing is kind of chipping away at it. All right. So I've got close to a third of it chipped out. I haven't worked on it for the last 2 days because it's been like hot and humid or something. It's been really uncomfortable even in the shade outside, so I haven't worked on it much. Anyway, somebody with a growth mindset is probably going to choose the things that are more complicated than the things that are easy. They're going to choose to play the team that challenges them and causes them to grow versus playing the team where they can get the easy win. If they are sporting, okay, however you want to look at that, whatever the score is, and their team is very clearly ahead, a coach with a growth mindset is going to say, all right, Bob, Sally, and Enrique and James, get in the game because we need more practice. Or they might say, we're going to change up what you're doing. And they may have their center playing forward, and you can tell I really don't know basketball. But anyway, they may switch up the positions and have their players play different positions so they can get a feel for it. Again, in that kind of safe to fail environment. So people with a growth mindset, they really need feedback. Okay, somebody with a growth mindset is constantly looking at their own skills. They're looking at what they've done. They're looking at what needs to be done, and they're looking for ways to achieve that. If they don't get feedback, then they don't know what to fix. So it's really important for them to get feedback. Let's say we're going to go back to the fixed mindset a little bit here. In Atlanta, Georgia, so when No Child Left Behind kind of first came out and testing was so emphasized, one of the things that happened is some states began to tie teacher evaluations to student scores on the tests. And this is problematic for a lot of reasons, which I'm not going to get into in this video. I will probably address that in another video at a later date. But here's what kind of happened. And I could see why it happened. So there's a lot of pressure. Teachers were essentially told, if your students don't show enough growth, either you're going to make less money or you're going to lose your job. And this is a terrifying idea. And the pressure was there at every level because the teachers had pressure to make sure that the students that were in their classrooms made gains. And then the administrators were responsible for making sure that all of their teachers had their students make gains. And it just went all the way up to the superintendent. And what ended up happening is people looked at this situation and instead of saying, okay, how are we going to engage our students, which would be growth mindset, how are we going to tackle this? How are we going to help them improve? What do they need in order to be successful? what this group did is they looked at the test, they looked at how far away improvement was. Okay, so let's say this is where the kids are testing, and this is where they're supposed to test, and this is ideally where you want them. Okay, well, they looked at this, and they saw this, and they're like, we can't get our kids from here to here in a year. We can't do it. And so what several of these teachers did, and apparently this was a school-wide thing, and there was quite a lot of pressure put on the individual teachers, is they would hold erasure parties. Okay, and they would go in and they would change student answers in order to boost the scores of their students, because they knew that the scores would reflect on them, and then the scores of the teachers would actually reflect on the principal. And I believe that several of them are in jail for it now. And I really think that it came from a fixed mindset and a sense of defeat, right? That we have been set up to fail, and if they're setting us up to fail, then we need to figure out how to survive. And if surviving means cheating, then that's what we're going to do. I don't know if this is an unfortunate or if this is a good thing. I think it was good in that it brought attention to things. I think it's unfortunate in what happened to these teachers and their careers, which were ended. I don't think any of these people are going to be teaching again. I don't remember where I was going with this, but you know, if teachers feel, if people have that kind of pressure, right, then it's going to cause a lot of other problems. And like I said, I don't want to get into the whole testing argument at this point, but it is definitely an issue, and I will talk to you in another video about why it's an issue, and it may not be the reasons that you're expecting. Okay. In the classroom, growth mindset is going to look at, I have all these students, and I've got a couple who are paying, but all of them have the ability to succeed. And I can honestly say that in the 13 years or so that I've been teaching, I've only met a handful of kids where I pretty much gave up on them, where I wrote them off. And those were kids who just didn't respond to anything that I was doing, who were completely enabled by things that were happening at home. They were not responsive. And I actually had 2 of them threaten physical harm or harm to my property, which was totally not cool. But yeah, it was a handful. I honestly don't even think it was 5 kids. I think it was probably like 2 or 3. It's such a small group because every year I was seeing like 150 kids. Okay, and I was seeing 150 different kids every year. So 10 years of teaching, that's 1,500 kids, and I only wrote off like 2, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. But like I said, these kids were not responding at all. Okay, growth mindset believes that everyone is capable of growth. So from a teacher's perspective, everyone is capable of growing, everyone is capable of being successful. The thing that's going to differ is what tools are used in order for them to be successful. And what else is going to differ is how much growth are you expecting to see within a year, or whatever the time period is that you have that person. If you're in a fixed mindset, you have an external locus of control, okay? Which means that everything that's happening to you is somebody else's fault, or it's the fault of somebody else. The dog ate my homework, or whatever. If you have a growth mindset, then you're internalizing things, okay? And that internalizing is going to be, okay, this has happened, how am I going to handle it, okay? You tend to be problem solvers without being just pure complainers. And there's a difference between complaining. Okay, so Mr. Costanza at the school complains a lot, and if you offer solutions, this person's not interested in seeing in hearing any solutions, which can be very frustrating. But you learn that that's just kind of how that person functions, and you got to let it go, because again, that's not something I can control. So if Mr. Costanza wants to do things in the way that he is, then it's not. Like I said, it's not something that I can control, right? I am responsible for me, and I cannot change him, okay? So when I was in college, I was taught a resilience model that I will also share with you in a later video. But one of the big things that this professor, Dennis Lobstein, talked about was resilience. And he talked about how important it was for people to be resilient. And he wasn't using the lingo of fixed mindset versus growth mindset because that's a relatively new, those are relatively new descriptors. But from this, uh, based on what he talked about, so resilience is going to be your ability to resist change, okay? Your ability to bounce back from things. So let's talk about that blade of grass, all right? You are a blade of grass in a beautifully manicured lawn. You're very strong, you're healthy, you get a trim every couple of weeks, and you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Well, somebody walks on you. The first time somebody walks on you, they may crush you and you're gonna, be ground down into the ground, but as soon as they go away, as soon as they step off of you, you're gonna sprout back up. Okay? But the more people walk on you, the more that you are unable to control as far as the damage that is occurring, the longer it's going to take for you to stand up. Eventually, you won't be able to stand up because you have lost the ability to. You've just taken too much damage. Okay? And what we want to do is we want to give people tools, students, ourselves, whoever it is that we're interacting with, tools so they can be resilient. All right. So if they face a challenge, then that means, and then they can go and they can get some help. So if you're that blade of grass, and I'm being taken care of by a gardener or whoever, a responsible person is going to notice that I'm starting to lose some of my resilience. I'm starting to lose some of my ability to bounce back into that nice, healthy grass that I was before. And if they're smart, they are going to put in a walkway somewhere, or they are going to fence it off and say, hey, you need to stay off the grass until it heals, that kind of stuff. But if the injuries just keep coming and that blade of grass doesn't have a chance to stand up, it's not going to stand up. It's going to lay down, and eventually it's going to die. Okay? All right. So the other kind of big thing that I want to talk about is that people aren't just one or the other. People aren't only growth mindset or only fixed mindset. It does fluctuate. It can fluctuate from topic to topic. It can fluctuate from year to year, day to day. It can fluctuate based on the environment that you're in. For example, Sally and her father, James Kirk, do not get along. And Sally finds that she is unable to have conversations with James without feeling just completely discredited, and it's kind of hard to explain how she feels. But what she finds is that when she is interacting with James, that she is in a fixed mindset, that he is not going to change, and that she needs to stop trying to change him. And this is actually a healthy reaction to this type of situation, because there are some people we just can't change. All right. People have a growth mindset, just like that blade of grass. If they keep experiencing things that are out of their control, that are causing a lot of damage to them, and they don't have that time that they need in order to recuperate, they can actually shift from a growth mindset, from a problem-solving mindset, to a fixed mindset of I can't control what's happening to me, and things are hopeless, which is a really scary thing. Okay. Other things that can affect your mindset is depression and other mood disorders. So I have a friend, let's call him Scotty, and Scotty suffers from depression. Okay, and sometimes his depression is so bad that he like does not get out of bed. He just sleeps all day. Obviously, this is not helping his mindset, but it's also one of those things where it's just like he doesn't feel he can face the world. He doesn't have the energy for it. Okay, and I think I've shared that sometimes I can get that way as well. Those are things that I'm working on. But also, this can be a disorders thing. Remember I said that people with a fixed mindset will kind of own their stuff? So if somebody is told this is what's wrong with you and this is what to expect, then you're going to own that. And you're going to say, oh, well, this happened because, and it will be because this thing happened to you, or because you are living with whatever, right? And Some people, fixed mindset people, will use this as an excuse. They'll say, well, I have a mood disorder, so I can't control myself, and this is never going to change. And if they're in a bad mood, they will, mistreat you if you're in a relationship with them. And then later, they're going to say, well, they may apologize, which would be good, but it doesn't actually really mean anything because the next time it happens, it's going to happen again. Um, but yeah, still use it to justify their abuse. And eventually, that person's not even going to say, I was in a bad mood and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to treat you that way. Eventually, that person's going to say, this is your fault because you know how I am and you know how I get and you should have known how to interact with me. Okay? So if somebody's in a relationship with that person, that is very difficult to deal with. All right. Fixed mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset. Things are stuck the way they are. They cannot be changed. Growth mindset. Things can be changed. Perpetually looking to learn, perpetually looking for improvement and refinement. Yeah. So this is a really good book. I encourage you to read it if you find the time. I think if you have a Kindle and you have like the Kindle Unlimited thing, that you can read it for free, but don't quote me on that. Okay? This is the Fat Health Teacher signing out. I hope that you all have a pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.